Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. And here we are, Science Fiction Night in the house. Let me just correct that just a little bit. Just felt like it. Had a chance to do some work. Been doing some work for the last several weeks now, ever since I got out of the. Do I have a reverb thing going? Shouldn't. I'll make sure. In any event, hey, everybody. Well, the big SpaceX launch coming up. I'm very glad they didn't launch when it wasn't ready and when things weren't looking good, but I've talked about that already. But as I was saying before, I've had a chance in the last several weeks to actually fool around with some of the science fiction animation stuff that I've been talking about for so long, and that basically took me out a year with the Cold War and the Apollo 11 stuff. I've got a hard out tonight at 7:30. My cat is doing the whole diabetes thing again. Actually, I need to set an alarm for that because I cannot blow through that. So give me 1 second. I hope everybody's doing well. We're still in lockdown hell here, and I do not understand why. I don't, but it seems that every single day more and more people in California go out and defy the orders, and there's nothing worse than a law that you don't enforce. It just makes the government look stupid. So it's fantastic. So I've got some really cool stuff to show, and all of this stuff is still in the form of tests, but it has come a long way since all of this stuff is now inside of Unreal Engine 4. So why don't we take a look at some test animations from the last couple weeks, since this is science fiction night. So here's the first one. We showed this one last time. I just thought I'd bring it back here. First thing I was able to do in Unreal is the landscape is completely pre-bought environment, but I did change the lighting quite a bit. I had a pretty decent rover model. I knew how to attach a light to something. I tried to do this in DAZ a year and a half ago. It took days and it looked like crud. But this is fantastic. I had to hand animate the movement over the terrain, which meant that there was no contact between the wheels and the terrain. Just every 20 or 30 frames, so 3 or 4 times a second, I went in there and positioned the rover and gave it a little bit of roll and stuff, make it look like it was going over some terrain. But I like that landscape an awful lot because it's dark and cold looking. I could put some snow or blizzard over the front in After Effects, and I might. The scene originally comes with snow flurries, but they just didn't look quite right. But even without them, I think that looks really cool. All right, so time for some new stuff. One of the things that I've been thinking an awful lot about is being able to move the story away from the Star Citizen universe a little bit and kind of into our own. So it's always been something that kind of connects with Star Citizen. But the more I've been thinking about it, the more I like the idea of spending a little more time in the Aurora Republic and getting away from the United Earth Empire and stuff, which means we have to have our own ships, long story. But anyway, that means I have to buy existing models. I can get some made, but some of them are decent. So here's one quick test of one landing. I'm not in love with the textures. They're not bad, but they're a little chalky. And the lighting is really pretty harsh as well. It looks an awful lot like a Star Citizen ship called the Reclaimer, but it's not. And it is a big, cool-looking ship. And there's a lot of stuff on there that I can animate that I couldn't do on the Reclaimer. Those thrusters, for example, will pivot down as well, and any number of other things and so on. But since we're dealing with... since I'd like to be dealing with as much of our own content as possible, we have to basically have kind of off-the-board ships for everything, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized if the guys who are doing this project were going to really do it off the grid, they'd have to do it in secret, and that meant they couldn't just disappear with a whole bunch of ships. They'd have to build a bunch, and that meant their own designs and stuff. there's another very nice plugin for Unreal 4. It's a Planetary Generator, and this one is still a little bit of a work in progress, but you can see that the detail on that is really, really nice. And I just really like it. And the amount of variety and versatility that you can do with this planet creator is just mind-boggling, honestly. It really is. So this was just a take I did on kind of a second Mars and put a little bit of ice in there and stuff. There's a very thin hint of an atmosphere and very thin clouds. But in any event, that's going to be able to provide a lot of, give us a lot of really beautiful backgrounds. Okay, so let's see. I finally took the time to get an Unreal tutorial done to get me to understand how the skeletons work, the meshes work, and all of that stuff. That was a very, very, very tough deal. In any event, once I did get the tutorial done and I was able to get animations in there, I was able to start animating characters. And I gave myself a test. This is the first animation I ever did in Unreal. And I just wanted a shot of an astronaut running across the moon, which meant I had to go get a guy in an astronaut suit. And then I needed to make it look like it was lower gravity, so I had to slow the animation down. And then once again, I had to hand animate pretty much every frame. So the foot placement and stuff isn't very good, but I decided I wanted to do an astronaut running on the moon, and I decided I wanted little puffs of dust to come up as well. So this was the very first character animation that I did. There's a lot that's not right with this, especially gets closer to the camera, and right there it's a little jinky. But nevertheless, for a first shot, it's not bad, and the ability to use these pre-existing animations is really amazing, and we're going to show you a little bit more of that too. Just a small little thing. Excuse me, sip of water here. It's very dry on the moon. One of the things that's very simple to do is I take this exact file as it exists, don't change a living thing, and I can drop in some volumetric fog onto the landscape, and that goes from that to this, which is kind of cool too. So we've got the ability to do really, really fun stuff. Since I saw this animation and since I was going to try and it's not really our moon. I just wanted him. I could have probably done a bunny hop if it was the other moon. But in any event, so once I had this, I had some other animations that I did since then. And before I came in today, I said, we're going to be talking about this. I'm wondering if I can set up a shot. So the next scene is something that took me about an hour, maybe a little bit more, to set up and do. But the next one is really showing what we're going to be capable of doing here. So there are 5 characters in this scene. There's some problems with the suits and some other things. And in fact, the suits here are so close to the color of the ground that it's very hard to see the 2 guys who are actually working on the rover. But I did this in about an hour, I guess. And given I did it in about an hour, I'm pretty happy with it. I get the puffs of dust. Yeah, I got the little dust puffs on the feet there as well. And I need to adjust those and so on. I'm not worried about footprints right now, Sarge. I'm just happy to get an image, to be honest with you. But there's actually 5 guys in that shot. So there's the guy in the foreground, the guy facing away, the guy backing up, bringing in some stuff. And then there's one guy working on the rear wheel of the rover, and then there's another guy doing some wiring on the side. There is a way to do footprints. I just don't know how to do it yet, but we'll get there. Anyway, now let's see what we can do with a higher quality model, and what will Unreal 4 do with all of the lighting on, all of everything. So the next 2 shots have a high quality mesh, and they have at least all I was able to determine in terms of ray tracing and all the rest of it. So and you get a real good sense of the motion in this motion capture file here. So this is what the final images are going to look like. I think that's pretty close to where we're going to end up being. Needless to say, I've still got to work on the fact that I put a black visor on the guys because I don't have any real head textures or the ability to make the heads do anything yet. But the detail on the suit is great, and the motion is really smooth. That mocap file is just really smooth. I got a good suit, and I also got a good helmet and had somebody rig it. And I can change the color of the undersuit from orange to blue, or I can do whatever I want to, obviously. This guy's a little over-armored for what I really want in terms of this prologue. That's the way to think of it now. Instead of starting on episode 1, I'm going to start on a prologue only because it's easier. Kind of explaining the whole thing. And basically talking about the exploration aspect of it. Like, okay, so we got off the grid and then we found a wormhole and that took us to this place, and then we found another wormhole and we promised ourselves we'd go 5 wormholes out, and we set up all the, just talking about the whole thing, how it happens. And so this guy's a little over armored for an exploration guy, but nevertheless, I still think it's pretty good. Yeah, anyway, and CP Tomes in the comments section points out that given what we've got today with, things like the quality of, even today, of virtual reality, there's really no reason to have a clear glass thing there. But I do. I think there is, and that is sometimes those things fail, and I don't want to be locked in. I'd like to be able to see things. But you could superimpose things on the inside of that helmet. So I'll let this run one more loop, and then I'll show you the final one, which is the same character inside of a set. Now the set is blood red, and that was not my choice. It's what loaded. I didn't have time to change the color, but nevertheless, you'll get a pretty good idea. And the next one was rendered at 4K, by the way. So let me just get through the end of that animation. It's right about there. Poof. So same model, same guy. All of the ray tracing is turned on. All of the lighting effects are turned on. All of it. If you look at the reflections on the floor when the camera moves, you'll see they change. You can see the reflection in the guy's gold helmet change. There's something jinky going on. I don't know what it is, but there's little jinks in the armor on his chest, like there. And I don't know what's causing it. It's probably a rigging issue. But nevertheless, that looks really not too bad. And I also did not have time to fully understand how to employ the depth of field, but that would help enormously. If he was in sharp focus and the background was slightly out of focus, that would help this animation quite a lot. But jinkiness aside and all this, this is downsampled to 1080, but it was rendered in 4K. And once the lighting is built, it takes, I don't know, this scene maybe, to actually render it, I would say it took, I don't know, 40 seconds. Yeah, it would be 40 seconds, not 40 days, which is what it would have taken in 3D Studio. 40 seconds. So the environment came pre-lit, the suit came pre-textured. I put the guy in there, I dropped a motion capture file on him, and then I built the lighting. Now, building the lighting takes a little longer. That's probably, in this case, maybe a 5, 6, 7 minute deal. But once the lighting is built, I can do any number of close-ups. I can cover this from 5 different angles. Once the lighting's built, it just renders in 40 seconds. Yeah, that's all pretty seriously cool. Now, I have also here, let me see if it's going to be able to work. Let's see, where did it go? This is all Unreal Engine 5. Now, 4 rather. This is Unreal 4. This is the Unreal Engine that's been there for a long time, and I'm really happy with that. I think that looks fantastic. And just as I'm starting to get done, I found I'm going to have the lead character. I'm going to have his head. I'm going to do a really nice kind of a really highly detailed feature head of this guy John Boyd, and put the 190 blend shapes into it. So that makes for really lifelike and smooth facial expressions. So that's currently being worked on. I found some great freelancers who do work for next to nothing. And all of this is in Unreal 4, and I'm thinking, man, this is fantastic. Somebody asked if I use Blender for modeling. All these models are purpose-bought models, and I've done modeling in 3D Studio. 3D Studio is the only part of this production chain that I'm actually familiar with, and I don't have time to do modeling. I did some kit bashing just for fun, and I liked it, but it just wasn't as good. I'm going to just hire people to build the models and texture them and so on. But in any event, I thought that looked pretty good. Now, I thought it looked pretty good because that's in Unreal 4. And then I want to say about a day ago, a week, 10 days ago, I saw, they keep updating Unreal 4, 4.19, 4.20, 4.23, and so on and so forth. Everything that you saw so far was in 4.24. And I thought, I wonder how long Unreal's been on version 4. Anyway, no problem. I'm very happy with it. And then about 10 days ago, Epic Games came out with the tech demo for Unreal 5. And I'm going to play it for you, even though it's 9 minutes long. I don't have to play all of it. I tried to get out of the opening, there's guys talking for a minute or two about the engine. But if you'll stick with me for that, you won't believe you won't believe it. The video's about, like I say, about 9 minutes. I'm not gonna play all of it by any means, but if you stay with it long enough, just let the guys talk about the Unreal Engine and what it does, and then you'll see some renderings, real-time renderings. It's a real-time. It's just simply mind-blowing. And by the way, somebody said that uses Blender because Blender's free, and so is Unreal Engine, which is very, very smart. Anyway, I won't put you through the whole thing, as I said, but stick around for the first minute or two while these guys talk about what this new engine does, and then look at the lighting and what the lighting is able to do, and realize that this will be out, I want to say, in the very first months of 2021, so that virtually everything that we do will probably be done in Unreal 5 rather than in Unreal 4. So take a look at this and prepare to be amazed, kids.
Hello, I'm Brian Karras, Technical Director of Graphics here at Epic Games.
Hi, I'm Jérôme Plateau, Art Director of the Special Project.
A few years ago, we got together as a team and brainstormed where we thought we could push forward the state-of-the-art in real-time graphics. There were two key areas that stood out. The first, dynamic global illumination. Beautiful bounce lighting, instantaneously.
I don't have to be constrained to do a game where the world has to be static, and I'm able to iterate a lot faster.
And we call this new system Lumen. And we're about to show you what it is capable of. But first, there was another area that we thought we could push forward. Truly virtualized geometry. The artist wouldn't have to be concerned over poly counts, draw calls, or memory. Could directly use film quality assets and bring them straight into the engine.
And that's a big deal for artists. I just want to be able to import my ZBrush model, my photogrammetry scan, my CAD data without wasting any time optimizing, creating LODs, or even lowering the quality to make it hit frame rate.
In the end, that's what it's all about. Art that just works. And we call this new technology Nanite. Here is the future of Unreal Engine running live on a PlayStation 5.
Awesome. Let's take a look at it.
This has to be the right way.
Before we continue, let's stop a moment and take a look at some of the key features of this demo. Much of what you see was built with Quixel Megascan assets, but instead of using the game versions, we used the cinematic versions, which would typically only be used in film. There are around 1 million triangles each, and thanks to virtual texturing, they all use 8K textures as well. Nanite can render an insane number of triangles very quickly. There are over 1 billion triangles of source geometry in each frame, that nanite crunches down losslessly to around 20 million drawn triangles. What does that many triangles look like? This isn't noise. These are the triangles, each a different color. Most are so small that they look like noise. Nanite achieves detail down to the pixel, which means triangles are often the size of pixels. This amount of geometric detail requires shadows to be pixel accurate as well, and nanite can do that too. Speaking of lighting, all of the lighting in this demo is completely dynamic, with the power of Lumen that even includes multi-bounce global illumination. No light maps, no baking here. Without GI, all of that beautiful lighting is gone. With Lumen enabled, we can move the light and the bounce changes instantly. Okay, let's keep going. We've made some great additions to our audio system as well. Convolution Reverb allows us to measure reverberation characteristics of real spaces, like actual caves that we sampled, and reproduce them in virtual spaces. Sound field rendering allows us to record and play back spatialized audio. All of this adds up to a more immersive experience. This swarm of bats was created with our Niagara effects system. Particles in Niagara can now talk to one another and understand their environment like never before. We've also added a ton of new functionality to run fluid simulations like you see in the water below. The demo runs on our chaos physics system. Here we are using it to accurately simulate the rigid bodies of the falling rocks and the cloth of her scarf. Now that the environment is so complex, we've needed to greatly improve our animation systems to adapt. We've added predictive foot placement and motion warping, which dynamically modifies IK and body position to look more natural. For the character to more realistically interact with the environment, we've added the ability to trigger seamless contextual animation events, like her hand on the door.
Looks promising.
Dynamic GI is amazing, not just for speeding up iteration, but also for its impact on gameplay.
Nice.
Any light
Looks-
source can move while
it
still
might
having
be.
beautiful bounce lighting. Dynamic illumination means specular as well, which you can see on all the metal surfaces. You can even see the Niagara-powered bugs reacting to the light. Lumen not only reacts to moving light sources, but also changes in geometry. Remember we mentioned high poly assets? This statue was imported directly from ZBrush and is more than 33 million triangles. No baking of normal maps, no authored LODs. And we can do more than a single statue. There are nearly 500 of that exact statue at the same detail level placed in this room, for a total of over 16 billion triangles from statues alone. Over this entire demo, there are hundreds of billions of triangles. So with Nanite, you have limitless geometry, and with Lumen, you have fully dynamic lighting and global illumination, all running on a PlayStation 5.
You get the idea. That's. I got two channels here. Hang on a second. I think that's got it. That's. I just don't know what to say about that. The reason that this is so interesting, and John Galt brings up a great point. He says, "Sorry guys, although this looks cool, I have zero interest in video games or graphics." I agree about that a large portion of the audience feels that way, and so do I, and on some level. But we're rapidly approaching the point where that is the kind of thing that there were parts of that I couldn't tell were computer graphics, and it was doing it at, I don't know, 60 frames a second, something like that. It is a game changer, and the thing that's so amazing, and I haven't got the faintest idea how they do it at all, not at all. But this business about being able to import, 30 million vertice models and then put 500 of them in a room. Right now, if you're looking for models that are playable in Unreal, Unreal will handle a bigger model, but it doesn't like a lot of big models because it's trying to do it all in real time. I don't have to do it in real time. The guy in the red building wasn't in real time. It took me about 45 seconds to render that 7-8 second animation, but still. But here's the thing. With this new lighting and this new detail, you no longer have to go to what's called low polygon assets. You can simply take the model and somehow put it in the scene. I don't know how they do it. There's got to be terabytes of information in there, and I don't even know how they load it into the computer and the RAM before they even render it. But in any event, the thing that's most striking about this demo for me is, number one, you can bring in super high complex objects and just treat them like anything else. And secondly, is the perfection of the lighting. For a while now, they've been using something called PBR textures, physically based rendering, which basically looks at light the way that light really exists. And this technology has been around for at least 10 years, probably longer. But with that tech demo, you realize that all you have to do is, if you build a cave, you give a guy a flashlight. You can take a standard lighting diagram. I think it's an IEE diagram. It basically talks about how the light spreads out from a flashlight. There's hundreds of them. And then he shines it around the room, and the light is perfect. And somebody pops a flare, and the light is perfect. And all the shadows are ray traced. It's unbelievable. So I had hoped to make these animations start as realistic as I could, as realistic as I could afford to. There are AAA studios that put out stuff that has, phenomenal realism. We showed one a couple weeks ago, but they've got $400 million and a couple hundred people working for them. But nevertheless, with this new technology, we will be able to do things that just really it's going to be like having a real movie studio in here. I don't know. It happened a lot sooner than I thought. I had no idea that these kind of tools were available and on the horizon. And this tech demo is not 4 years out. This is November or February, something like that. So between now and then, we'll be collecting our assets and getting all that stuff together and so on. And Dave Big Booty says, with that technology, I don't need to be in LA. I can move to America. I would enjoy it enormously. But that's real time. That's what games are going to look like. I'm not so much interested in it for the games, although I have to say that Star Citizen, which still looks fantastic, I for the life of me, I'm still trying to figure out why they went with the CryEngine and then over to the CryEngine port for Amazon called Lumberyard. I think it might have something to do with the Amazon servers. I'm not 100% sure. Julius, just can you put the date in there again for me, please? Talking about the wedding. But nevertheless, I've read an awful lot about Star Citizen and some of the decisions they made, and when Unreal 5 comes out, it is going to make Star Citizen, which has always been primarily noted for its beautiful graphics, obsolete. It makes everything obsolete. And we were talking about when Scott and I were talking about, really Scott honestly was talking about redoing the website and stuff. We were thinking about what kind of platform, and the argument for WordPress was that it is so alive. There are millions and millions of websites that use that software, and thank you. I'm planning on being there, buddy. Millions and millions and millions of websites. They're constantly adding plugins. They're constantly making it easier and easier and easier. This is a blog or website technology, WordPress, and it's and why you wouldn't go with that in place of something that's more of a niche. I don't know, but I'll tell you what. This is a game changer, and I'm completely stunned by it. So I am very, very much looking forward to getting my hands on Unreal 5, and I love the idea of being able to deal with high poly modeling, and just from an artistic point of view, here's the summation I was looking for. Here's what that Unreal 5 engine demo showed me. With Unreal 5, I don't have to know anything about computers, essentially. I don't have to find a guy to really do the lighting, although I could. You get somebody to light a set the way you'd light a real set. But it's doing so much of the work. Motion capture is doing what used to be hand animation for faces. Body motion capture is doing what used to be motion animation for bodies. And really, you're getting into the world now where you can simply go in there and make movies. I have given some thought to doing Big Bad Problems in Unreal 4. I didn't want to do it, and I won't. We'll see how it looks in Unreal 5. If it looks as good as it appears to look, again, what you saw was it probably 60 frames a second on a PS5. On a PC, if I can get it to look photorealistic, then I'll do it. And by the way, another thing that opens up is the ability to do that original movie Aurora, which was about the trip to Jupiter. That would be a piece of cake in this. So anyway, that's all good news, and I'm very, very pleased about it. So let's go to Facebook. We'll take some questions. We got a little under an hour. I hope you enjoyed this stuff, but nevertheless, I did, and everything was just playing around so far. But I am actually starting to learn Unreal Engine. The more you do it, the more familiar it gets, the faster you can work. So I put that scene with the 5 astronauts out there together in an hour. Let's just look at that one more time, why don't we? It's about an hour's work. And with better assets, the suits are it's a low poly suit, and so there's not a lot of detail on the suits. But with better assets, we will. Oh, sorry about the echo. Yeah, I had 2 captures on there. Anyway, you get the idea. So back to Facebook. Let's see what happens here. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, here we go. Facebook fans. I'm going to move this over here. Oh, how about that? It's kind of fun. Hang on. get my comments over there and my other stuff over here. We go. Okay, so the first question is from Steve Young, top fan, Steve Young. Prager, Bongino, and Whittle bust social media's chops over editorializing, and President Trump lays an executive order out against them. Now that's sci-fi. That's come true. I saw that today. I don't. It could be too good to be true. As I've said before, and I won't go into this argument now because we made it a number of times, but Facebook, YouTube, Twitter have legal protection because they're legally considered to be carriers. If I post nothing but scenes from the latest movie, Paramount can't come after Facebook. They can come after me, but they can't come after Facebook because Facebook can say, "Hey, we're just carriers of the content. We're not responsible for it. We just run it. We don't produce it. We don't create content. We are just a neutral carrier." And that's the legal protection that all three of them had. You can imagine how quickly Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter would dissolve if you were able to enforce copyright infringements on those things. But you can't because they're a carrier. But when they start making editorial decisions in terms of what's going on in the content, in other words, when they're saying that we're a carrier, but they are deciding politically what they're carrying, that's editorializing. They are producing content in that regard, and that is the end of them, one way or another. And it would, they're not going to fold the businesses, so it would be the end of most of this shadow banning. Scotty will tell you, just as I will, that you watch the history of our videos on Bill Whittle channel on YouTube. Over time, I'm speaking like over months or years, it goes like this. It's growing, drops. Growing, drops. I'm not talking about one video, I'm talking about hundreds. Growing, drops. Growing, drops. And the drops are where YouTube changes their algorithm and deletes unused accounts and basically makes sure that we don't start, being able to make any real money off of this. It's just the fact that the president has mentioned this and that the attorney general is on it is going to be, I think the worst case is that this is a pretty impressive brushback pitch. We put one like right past their nose, and they're going to step back because they could lose the farm over this. That's why this election is so important. Just absolutely essential. Not as essential as the last one. If we'd lost the last one, it was over. It'd just be done. But this one really matters too, and Republicans seem fired up. I don't know when the Democrats are going to switch Joe Biden for whichever candidate they're going to run with. If I had to bet right now, I'd say he would name Elizabeth Warren as his vice president, and then then the liberals would be delighted because they know they'd be getting President Warren. I think that's the most likely case. But in any event, just the fact that they're talking about this and that the president issued an executive order. I am against executive orders, but I have to tell you, this is back to the Guadalcanal argument. I'm also tired of watching freedom fly away. And the way they make freedom fly away is to control the story, the narrative. And the way they do that is by being able to censor this. So if it's executive order that provides some kind of freedom of speech on the social media networks that everybody goes to for their news, then it's not the way I would like it. I'd like legislation, but it's better than nothing, and hopefully the legislation will come. So anyway, great point, Steve. Hey, look at this top band, George A. Freeland. In what specific industry do you think we'll see the first trillionaire? Asteroid mining, lunar, Martian real estate, space manufactured goods? Let's see. Has anyone cracked 100 billion? Has Bezos cracked 100 billion? I don't think they have. The great thing about this show is now, in the space of about 5-6 seconds, the net worth of the richest person in the world will show up right here. But I don't think it's much past 100 billion. Oh, several over 100 billion. Okay, so we're a tenth of the way. 162. Okay, that's a lot of money. 162 billion dollars. They're saying that Merlin says that Bezos is named the first trillionaire. He may not be a trillionaire now, but if Amazon keeps growing the way that it appears to, he looks like he's on his way. So if he's at 152 billion now, or 160 billion, he's he's an eighth of the way, something like that. So he's still got a way to go. Now, does that mean if I had to put money on it, I would say, since the question is who do I think is going to be the first trillionaire, I think it's probably likely to be Jeff Bezos, only because what he's delivering is so worldwide useful, and since you can get anything on Amazon, just shows up the same the next day. It used to anyway. That's just going to continue to grow. So he's certainly on a fast horse, and the horse doesn't look at all tired. So that would be the way to bet. But somebody might break out. I don't see anybody coming out of nothing and getting to $1 trillion. But it is entirely possible, as people have pointed out, that one good asteroid and you're the richest person in the history of the world. There's an asteroid that I forgot the name of, but in any event, it's estimated at $5,000 billion worth of platinum, $5 trillion on one rock, and getting up there is unbelievably hard, but getting back down again is pretty simple. And in fact, it's crazy simple. Matter of fact, it's automatic. Getting back down is not the problem. It's getting back down slowly enough. But in any event, if they could get to an asteroid, yes. But you've got a long way to go. I think if we really made a determined effort, we could be landed on an asteroid easily within 2 years. I don't think that'd be tough at all. But then the question is, how do you actually mine that thing? I mean, are you going to bring back raw ore? And is that cost of that raw ore significantly lower than the cost of mining it here on Earth, or so on? In any event, we will see economy, assuming that the Democrats don't run everything. We will see economies that are large enough to have individual trillionaires in them. And this is kind of the backstory for the whole Aurora thing, is that this guy basically, a prospector, found a $40 trillion cluster, and he's like the 8th richest guy in the Imperium now or something. He's got real money, enough money to help back this whole thing. In any event, it's pretty cool. But if you had to ask me right now, George, and you did, I'd go with Bezos, because anything else is going to be like a black swan event, I think. Bob Knife, top fan. And as an aside to the topic du jour, I live 10 miles south of Dave Big Booty, and about 5 miles south of me, they closed a Home Depot and Costco due to looting. That's sad. That's really, 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 really almost unbelievable. I live in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and this is something rather weird to experience here in a peaceful suburb of St. Paul, Minneapolis. Any thoughts or insights on this mess in Minnesota? I have to tell you, Bob, it's heartbreaking. I'm not saying it's the first bad thing that happened during the pandemic, but it's the first bad thing I've heard of in terms of the general population. I did talk to a police officer outside of a 7-Eleven 5 weeks ago, right 2-3 weeks into the lockdown, and just said, "Hey, how you doing, officer? You guys doing a great job out there." I said, "Thank you." And I said, "Things pretty much quiet out there?" And he said, "No, a lot of people misbehaving." I said, "It's unpleasant to hear, but nevertheless, there you go. Now, a lot of the country has seen an enormous spike in crime because progressives decided that they had to let prisoners out of prison so they didn't get COVID-19. And those people are out on the loose, and somebody committed a murder, I think the same within 24 hours of being released because of COVID-19 pandemic, which is caused by the Wuhan virus, which originates in communist China. So I don't know who's responsible for that. It's not, if I had to bet, it wouldn't be the kind of Minnesotans I've met. I've never met people nicer than that. I was on the steps of the state capitol in January of 2011, and they kept me alive. It protected me from freezing to death. Anyway, John Galt says he spoke with a cop who said that rapes and murders are way up in New York. And then Tom Bombadil says he is a cop and he has to disagree in our area. Tom, does that mean things are quiet there? It seems quieter out there. I mean, I live in a nice suburb of Los Angeles. Last month things are going back to normal, but before that we were less busy than ever. That would make sense to me. It would seem like if I was going to be burgling houses or running around with stolen merchandise in the trunk or whatever, that you'd want as many cars on the road as possible and not be the only person coming out of a neighborhood at a particular time. But I don't know. I'm awful sorry to hear about that. Somebody else pointed out in the comment section that that a number of closed businesses are being burgled. That has to be added to the price too. And China's going to have to pay for this. If it came out of a lab, and I'm fairly convinced it did, but nevertheless, this has been a catastrophe, and California is in free fall, and the governor continues to allow people to just flout the law, which is horrible for him. Anyway. Let's keep it on science fiction to the degree that we can. Bob Knife, another question. Honest question, I'm really not into sci-fi, but I did like 2001. What's the basic essence and fascination with sci-fi? Thanks. That's actually a great question, Bob. For me, it's funny because I was thinking about this. I've been looking at third-party assets. And thinking about Star Citizen and the history of its fundraising and the appeal of it and all the rest of it. And it seems to me that the biggest draw in science fiction on a visceral level is the ship. It's ships and the view out the window from ships. But I think it's ships. I know there have been, I don't know, 7 different versions, official canon versions of the USS Enterprise. The Wrath of Khan version is my favorite. That just evokes a practical religious experience in me watching that thing. So there's a beauty about them and an interest about them, and it appeals to the nerd side of the science fiction fan, which is the big side. And so there's the whole just the technical interest of this ship and the fact that it could be yours and you can ride on it and go see things. The exploration angle is stuff that I'm going to be playing up very hard in this prologue that I've been thinking about. Just going to show lots and lots and lots and lots of alien planets and alien environments and oceans and huge things coming out of the fog and all of that stuff. So there's that whole strange new world thing. That's a lot of it. From an intellectual point of view, I think that the real essence of science fiction is it's the laboratory of society that you can't build in the real world. Science fiction allows you to look at. It's like changing the variables. In fact, the classic science fiction film, maybe the classic science fiction film, story rather, is it called The Sound of Thunder? Is it Ray Bradbury? I don't remember. I will be confirmed here again. An 8-second lag between me and reality. But it's the story of a company that invents a time machine, and then hunters pay huge amounts of money, a sound of thunder, go back in time, and they get to shoot like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But they understand that if they kill Tyrannosaurus Rex before it's supposed to die, that could change the timeline of the future. And so they've constructed this kind of glistening pathway that floats above the Earth, and then they wait to find a T-Rex that's about to be killed as it would be killed by like a falling rock or something, and then just before that happens, they shoot it and it preserves the timeline of the future. Well, anyway, in this story, somebody panics. They fall off the little path, get back on, get back in the time machine, come forward, and everything seems normal, except now it's a complete fascist dictatorship in the country. And he looks at his boot, and when he went off the path, looks at his boot, he sees a butterfly that he stepped on by accident. And the death of that butterfly led to the death of, that meant a reptile didn't get fed, which didn't get food for something else, and so on. And because of that one butterfly, the perturbations down over 150 million years were microscopic, but over that kind of time, enough to drift society off on the way. That's where you get the term. That's not where the butterfly effect comes from. The butterfly effect deals with the fact that that you can't predict a system as chaotic as weather, because the fluttering of the wings of a butterfly in China change the micro equation. But in any event, was that Heinlein who wrote that, Sound of Thunder? Anyway, it's the classic. It's the classic science fiction story, and the Simpsons did the greatest segment on that. That was my favorite line from the Simpsons of all time, and it's Grandpa and it's at a Treehouse of Horror episode, and he's at the wedding reception, Homer's wedding reception. It's a flashback, it's a thought balloon kind of thing. Homer gets sent back in time and keeps changing the future, and he says, "Now, what was it that Dad told me at my wedding?" And then the thought balloon comes up, and it's Grandpa, and he says, "Homer, if you ever go back in time, don't step on anything." That was the advice he gave him. It was just great. Anyway, but in answer to your question, Bob, the reason it's the classic science fiction story is it is the essence of what science fiction is. It's a chance to look at a world different than the one that we're living in and see how we would do. Here's something that's really interesting. Really, really interesting. If you look at like the Buck Rogers stuff, right? You got the rocket, pointy little rocket, and like sparklers coming out the back, and it's circling on a string and stuff. And you look at Buck Rogers, and you see Buck Rogers in his silver underwear and all the rest of this stuff. And inside the cockpit, there's nothing. They're just levers, and they're flying this thing with levers. And you look at it, and you come out of something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, or something like that, and you think, oh God, those idiots, they were so far away from how it's really going to be. And I remember thinking to myself, and so are we. Our best guess of what it's going to look like is going to look like the 30s. We will be that far off of it. And then just almost to like smack me in the face over this, it turns out that likely the first rocket to land on the moon or even Mars is going to look virtually identical to the Buck Rogers rocket ship. And I'm just gobsmacked. I have to tell you, I know I'm going to get some blowback on this, and I'll also get some sympathy. That heavy lifting rocket, the stainless steel rocket that SpaceX is building, is, in my opinion, the ugliest thing that has ever left the Earth. The Dragon capsule looks fantastic, and as I pointed out on the live feed the other day, on Starship, that Elon Musk said, "I want the capsule to be beautiful." The inside of the capsule looks like a waiting room at in the world's most expensive hair salon. But nevertheless, the interior of the Dragon and the exterior of the Dragon capsule. The Dragon capsule looks like a capsule from the future, especially when they're using their escape system. I think they wanted to use those rocket engines to land with. But anyway, it's fantastic. And as a small point that I hadn't realized, and you think I should have, but the beautiful thing about this, as opposed to an escape tower on top of the capsule, is that you abandon the tower on the Apollo flights or the Gemini Mercury flights or whatever. Somewhere in the flight profile, the escape tower just comes off and flies away. But that means that there's a segment of the flight profile when maybe you might still want your escape system, and it's gone. When it's built into the capsule, the way it is with Dragon 2, it's with you the whole duration. It's there the whole trip. So anyway, that's pretty impressive. So let's see what else we got here. Russ Emerson, Top Fan. That's not a sci-fi question. Sorry, Russ. I'm happy to. And it's about the Minnesota things are more or less the same thing. Steve Young, how does a ring world hold an atmosphere? Through the strange property of gravity and density, Steve. Not many people know this, but if you were to crash a decent-sized asteroid into Mars, Mars's air pressure on the surface about 1% that of the Earth. It's just barely there. But if you were to make a crater deep enough and fill it with air, it would take a long time. If the crater was big enough and deep enough, the air is so heavy, you'd be losing stuff out to space, but it would take a long time. You could have atmospheric pressure at the bottom of a crater much easier than you would imagine. So a ring world, basically, if you've got a ring and then you've got walls on the side, you don't technically need to completely enclose it. The centrifugal forces that are acting on the people and on the ground and on the water is also acting on the air, and the air. Oh, the walls on Ringwald were 1,000 miles high. I bet that ought to do it. And then the amount of air loss is certainly noticeable, but it's manageable. You can replace it. There's a story, I think it was part of a traveler adventure from my wasted end of the 1970s. But it was really, really cool. And I think that this part of the adventure was based on a pre-existing science fiction story. But basically, you go to this planet, and it's like a vacuum world or something like that. And there's a bunch of like cannibal savages living there from, descended from spacemen, and they just degenerated and been there for 100 years. And they live in this cave, and what they've done is they've hung sheets of like super heavy material like canvas. And they've hung like 100 of them in the mouth of this cave. And when you go in and out, you let the air from one, it's not airtight. It's more like a baffle, but it's definitely not airtight. But because there's like 100 baffles here that you had to just basically walk through, it slows the loss of air enough so that it's essentially next to nothing. By the time you get to the, if you're walking out from the pressurized area, you go through 100 of these things. By the time you get to 99, the difference between 99 and the vacuum is next to nothing, but it's still slightly something. I don't know if it would work in real world, but it sounds like it might. I don't know. The whole cave might depressurize instantly. I guess it would do that if those things were flexible enough. But I don't know. In any event, it was a cool idea, and that's really what science fiction is. It's just a cool idea. And something tells me they were made like out of human skin or something horrible like that. So the idea that you could just basically go through a series of curtains and go from vacuum to atmosphere, I don't know if it's true or not in the real world, whether it's possible, but it's cool. And it gets you thinking about things. And that's another thing that science fiction does, is get you thinking about the tech and gets you thinking about the social ramifications. It's been beaten into the ground how many real-world devices were inspired by Star Trek, things like the tricorder and communicator. Those were cell phones in 1964 65, flip phones, as a matter of fact, in 1965, 66, and 66, and just the idea that you could just carry something and talk to people was just revolutionary, and now they've got it. So that's awfully cool. Susan Speakman, I've got about another 20 minutes. If you could only choose one, would it be Heinlein or Asimov? I'm going to have to ask if this is a trick question. The reason I'm going to ask if it's a trick question is because it to me it's so heavily Heinlein that it's almost like it's almost hard to mention the two of them in the same sentence. I actually thought that Asimov was a really great writer, and then I went back and read the Foundation trilogy about a year ago, or tried to, and I think I got through the first book, and I just couldn't go any further. I was absolutely convinced that somebody had rewritten the Foundation trilogy for third graders, and hadn't told me about it. But Asimov had Heinlein just was better. I thought just better. But my favorite science fiction writer was Arthur C. Clarke. But Heinlein was dealing with some big ideas. There was something a little bit cartoony, I guess, about Asimov. However, another candidate for the best science fiction story ever written. I forget the name of this one too, but basically, it's the thing that made fun of in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Is that Douglas Adams or some Douglas? Anyway, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Question, is it the last question? Yeah. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy made fun of this, but it was really great, and basically they try to build a computer that builds another computer that builds another computer builds another computer to figure out the secret of the universe. And then when you get to the cosmic AC, which is analog computer, as I recall, the cosmic AC says, let there be light. And by this point, the thing is so powerful that creation begins. I remember at the time being really impressed by that. Douglas Adams. I'm not 100% sure that I would be as impressed with it today, although the idea was great. Heinlein, on the other hand, to me is still readable. Starship Troopers is still, I think, still really readable, and I have a hard time with Asimov today. Ray Bradbury was a guy who was always kind of on the weird side of things. The Martian Chronicles was not what I expected, and that was kind of refreshing. But I was expecting a Mars adventure. That's not what I got. They made a pretty decent. Now again, I haven't seen this in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years maybe. So I don't know whether it holds up or not. But at the time, I thought it was pretty good. They did a movie version of The Illustrated Man. They did 3 segments of The Illustrated Man. And, oh gosh, what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. Rod Steiger, thank you. And they did 3 episodes, and I thought all 3 of them were really good, especially the one about the prophecy. I thought that was great. So everybody's got their own version. I saw this. They made Atlas Shrugged 10 years ago, 15, 12 years ago. Conservatives bought the rights and made it. I think Angelina Jolie originally was interested in it. And God knows how hard it is and to make a movie like that. But it looked like it was made for $100. I mean, it really was just, you have to have a serious budget for that movie. And you got to find a way to cut 95% out of what Ayn Rand wrote. Because there is a story in there, and it's a good story. But I mean, these are supposed to be the movers and shakers of the world, and they look like they're, their office looks like, pharmacist office or stuff. But Childhood's End, Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, is the greatest movie never made. I don't know why it was never made. It's a brilliant story. It should have been made 5 times already. I will say that the new Dune looks fantastic. And I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a two-parter, and I didn't know much about the director, and then I realized he directed a couple of movies that I like quite a lot. Is it Arrival? So in any event, the new Dune I think is going to be grand, and that I think they're looking at November, December of this year. So part 1 anyway, so that's looking cool. Yeah, I got about 15 minutes left to go. Let's see. Okay, well, let's see if I don't really have an answer for this. Sarge wants to know, it's well known that there are movie series where the so-so original subsequently produces a much better sequels. Alien and Pitch Black come to mind, in my humble opinion. What other original science fiction movies were followed by a much better sequel? I can tell you some of them that weren't. I thought 2010 was terrible. It's just an awful movie. And I don't think that Alien was a so-so movie. Aliens is my favorite film of all time. But I don't think that Alien was weak at all. I think Alien was a match for Aliens. Somebody pointed out, Roy Hamill said Terminator. That's a great example. The first Terminator is a pretty good movie, but Terminator 2 was mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. So there's that. Let me see. I'll tell you what's a shame is when Ridley Scott was brought back to direct the most recent 3 of the Alien series, starting with Prometheus and then into Covenant. I loved the art design for that. I loved it. I just loved it. The movie was just not good, and Covenant had again elements that were just terrific, but again not very good. And I think mostly because the lead characters, especially the one in Alien Covenant, was just the actress is just so weak, Just not a bad actress, just kind of critical drinker would say, block of wood. But there's so much potential there, really was, and I just kind of blew it. I loved the whole thing with the engineers and stuff, but I don't know. There's some rumors that he might tie everything up in the third one, but that's no excuse for making 2 movies that don't make a whole lot of sense and have you leave it feeling kind of like, that was all right. Let's see. This is great. Charles Tomes says, is Elon Musk a combination of D.D. Harriman from Heinlein and Buckaroo Banzai, or does the lack of a pop music band disqualify him as a real-world Buckaroo Banzai? I never really quite put those 2 together, and you would think I would have done it instantly, but I never did until just this moment, Charles. He really is the closest thing to it. He looks like him. I mean, they don't look alike, but he's got that vibe, young, dark and a little off, a little strange. I really think he is one of the most remarkable individuals ever to live. Really do. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with him, and there are some things I have problems with too. But on balance, I think just SpaceX alone would have been unbelievable. But Tesla and Hyperloop and all of that stuff is just absolutely astonishing. It's just really world-changing stuff. The Tesla battery that powers your house, it's just cool, and he goes for it. But this kind of brings me to Buckaroo Banzai. which I haven't talked about in a while, and it's probably worth talking about for another 10 minutes or so, and I have to go get my cat. Okay. That movie is I don't know of anything like it. I really don't. I've never ever felt that smart people were as cool as they were in Buckaroo Banzai. It just blew me away. I loved it. I loved it. And what I loved the most was probably the first 10 minutes of the movie. I think that was my favorite part of the whole movie. I mean, you've got a guy, he's a brain surgeon. He gets called in to consult on a particular problem with an aneurysm. And Jeff Goldblum is doing the brain surgery, and Buckaroo Banzai goes over to give him advice, and Goldblum says some medical jargon about this and this, and I want to pull on that because it might do this and so on. And then Banzai's looking at it, and then Goldblum moves in with a pair of forceps or something, and then Buckaroo says, no, don't touch that. You don't know what it might be connected to. That was classic. And then the guy helicopters out, and the next thing you know, he drives his Ford truck through a mountain into the 8th dimension. And then as soon as he's done with that, he and the rest of his scientists go out, and they're a badass 80s band. And for those of you who haven't seen the movie, you see these guys, and they're all brilliant scientists, and then they're all just so cool, and they're all so fashionable, and all of this stuff. It just was just great. And then they're in the nightclub playing, and they're all got their instruments and stuff. And then Penny Pretty decides to shoot herself and misses. And the second that gunfire goes off, every single member of the band pulls out like more weapons than you've ever seen, just instantly. And I thought to myself, all right, so you got a guy who's a brain surgeon, an advanced physicist, he's a rock and roll singer, and he's heavily armed. What else do you need? I think he's the most unique character in the history of science fiction, and I would like to take a pass at that again. I'd like to. Whoever does it, if it ever gets done again, whoever does it really needs to have a real love for it. Russ Emerson talks about the guy who played Perfect Tommy. He was fantastic. They were all great. Everybody was great. And that's a great name, Perfect Tommy. It's a great character name. It's all you need to know. And with the name Perfect Tommy and the way the guy played that role, he's probably got 10 lines in the movie, but you get it. You really get it. John points out Clancy Brown is just a great cast. Goldblum was great. Lithgow is my favorite Lithgow performance. And then you've got the other two Electroids. Their names elude me, but they're both also famous actors. Dan Hedaya is one, and the strange-looking other guy is the other. It's just a great movie. But in any event, it needs something. It needs to be loved if it's going to be remade, and that is going to bring me to our final topic about this. Christopher Lloyd is in it, and it's not Christopher Lloyd. There's somebody else too. Is it Carl Lumbly? Is that his name? Oh no, he played John Parker. Christopher Lloyd. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Hello, Cynthia. How are you? Anyway, Critical Drinker, who I think is one of the smartest guys I've ever heard. He's apparently a real world novelist, and he does a lot of film criticism. And I love the style and the whole delivery and the drunken character and the self-references. But Drinker, you stunningly handsome yet strangely opaque and mysterious stranger, I hear you say. It's self-deprecating. It's fantastic, and I love his takes on everything, because Vince Schiavelli, that's the guy. Yes, Vince. Anyway, back to the Critical Drinker. Like the guy at Red Letter Media, I'm having a problem with names tonight. I want to say Stefan something. Anyway, the guy who plays Mr. Plinkett. The guy who plays Mr. Plinkett and Critical Drinker and a few others are absolutely brilliant script analysts. They are Mike, thanks. They're brilliant. By the way, we have here in the comment section, we have Dave Big Booty and Joe Smallberries, who's undoubtedly younger brother of John Smallberries. Got a lot of Buckaroo references here in the live section, and Doomcock is clever too. But Doomcock and Nerdrotic are commenting on what's going on, but deep Critical Drinker and Mike Stolska are really on a different level, and it may be the latest thing that Critical Drinker did, but he was talking about why Hollywood's trying to understand why Discovery failed, and it looks like the Pike series is going to be awesome, and why, and is it racism? Is it the patriarchy? And trying to figure out the formula for what makes a character likable and enough to build a movie on and build a whole franchise on. And he says that they're well written. And that's, if you just left it at that, that would be an interesting insight, because that's really it is. It's not like they have to be white or male. They don't have to be good guys. They can be bad guys, whatever, all of it. But nevertheless, what he said was, and this is really, I think he got right to the heart of it. Drinker said that if you're going to have a character, if you're going to write a character that's going to be an interesting character and one that is going to stand out from the crowd, like Luke Skywalker or Captain Kirk or things like that. He said if you're going to write that character, you have to love them. Even the villains you have to love, because the quickest way to either destroy an existing character or to make just a character that doesn't register in the first place is to mock them, is to make fun of them. The way they mocked Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi, and just contempt for the guy. And a lot of characters write with contempt. I don't know what the... Picard was just tragically bad. And it is enough to make me believe, and in the face of a great deal of other evidence as well, not just this one thing with Picard. But nevertheless, it's enough to make you believe that the entire point of Star Trek Picard was to destroy Jean-Luc Picard as a character for Next Generation fans. Just destroy him the way that they destroyed Luke Skywalker. He went from being an action-oriented, erudite, decisive guy to being just a doddering old man who's being led in every direction by other people, usually by powerful, diverse women, and he's just... It's disgraceful. It's like watching The Simpsons now. You just don't even call it The Simpsons. It's not The Simpsons. It's the animated galvanized corpse of what The Simpsons used to be. Anyway, the contempt for Picard and the contempt for the entire universe, the contempt for Star Trek that's evident in Star Trek Discovery, is mind-boggling. They don't like Star Trek. They really don't, and they really can't. You can just look at any of these episodes and just say they don't respect it, and they don't understand it, and they don't like it. And I think that's really, really true. And God knows we've seen so much of our pop culture be destroyed by these progressives. I don't know whether they go into it thinking, now it's time to destroy Luke Skywalker, or whether it's we need to destroy Luke Skywalker in order to make Rey look good, or they just don't understand how to do it. But in any event, they are degenerate third, fourth, and fifth-rate hacks trying to live up to first-rate writing. The writing staff on the first Star Trek series was Harlan Ellison and just tremendous stories. Some bad stories too, but there were some very good ones there as well. I have to go pick up my cat, guys, before they close the vet. It's about 7:30 here in California, so I'm going to put a pin in this one. And thanks as always to the members of BillWhittle.com who make this show possible and make all the other fun stuff that we did at the beginning of the show possible. And we will undoubtedly be back next Thursday night. And more people will be disobeying the law, and in the long run, that's all good. If all this pandemic does is make people realize that the government is stupid and irresponsible, doesn't give a damn about you, and it's all about power, then maybe it'll flip California. It's not unheard of. Anyway, so that'll do it. Thanks again for joining us. And you guys take it easy out there, and we will see you next week right here on